It's theory time, it's theory time. Come on everybody, it's theory time. Hi guys, welcome to Theory Time. Today we're going to talk about some chords with larger extensions like 9s, 11s, and 13s. So if you haven't watched our previous tutorials on 3 and 4 note chords, this one might not make a lot of sense, so it'd be a good idea to check those out first. So the first thing I'm going to do is take you through a major scale, and it goes like this. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. But if I were to keep going in a second octave, I could call this note 9. And you'll notice that this 9th note is the same as the second note. They are both D in the case of C. So when I say a 9, I mean a second also. It's the same thing. So you can think of it as either a 9th if you want, or a second. Whichever works better for you is fine. So remember this. 9 and 2 are the same. 11 and 4 are the same. 13 and 6 are the same. Okay? So let's get into it. So the first chord we're going to build is an add 9 chord. And it goes like this. First, third, fifth, ninth. There it is. Add 9 chord. The difference between an add 9 chord and a 9 chord is that a 9 chord starts out like a dominant 7th chord. So it goes 1, 3, 5, flat 7, 9. And it goes like this. I'm going to organize it like this. So 1, 3, flat 7, 9, 5. The next chord we're going to build is a major 9, and the way it works is the same as a major 7. So 1, 3, 5, major 7, and then you add a 9th to that. So you end up, I'm going to organize it like this. So I have a 1, 3, major 7th, 9th, and there's a major 9 chord. You'll notice I left the 5th out of that chord. When you're building chords, it's okay to omit certain intervals, and the 5th is definitely one that you can get rid of. So just remember that when you're building these bigger chords, especially, you'll need to omit certain notes, and the 5th is definitely one that you can chop. So the next chord we're going to build is a minor 9, and it goes like this, same as a minor 7, 1, flat 3, 5, flat 7, and then you add a 9th to that, so you end up with a minor 9. Cool. And then we're going to build a minor 11 chord, and in theory, an 11 chord should have the previous extension. So an 11 chord should have a 9th in it too. It's not totally necessary when you're playing it on a guitar. You can omit the 9th if you need to, and you probably will because it's a pretty bulky chord. So here's a minor 11th. It goes 1, flat 3, 5, flat 7, 9, 11. So I'm going to organize it like this, which is 1, 4, which is the same as 11, flat 7, flat 3, 5. So you'll notice I left out the 9th, right? If I really want, I guess I could replace the root with a 9th. And yes, believe it or not, you can replace the root in a chord or omit the root in a chord if you need to. That's what bass players are for. So here's a fun thing, just a fun aside here. When you grab a guitar, when you're playing your guitar for the very first time, I bet you went like this. Just play like all the open strings. Just so you know, that's an E minor 11th chord. So the first chord you ever played was probably a fancy jazz chord, and it was this E A D G B E, which goes like this in the key of E: 1, 4 or 11, flat 7, flat 3rd, 5th, and another root. Cool, right? E minor 11th. Next chord we're going to build is a 13 chord, and in theory, a 13 chord should start out like a 7 chord, so 1, 3, 5, flat 7. But then you should also include the 9th, the 11th, and the 13th. So let's count that. 1, 3, 5, flat 7, 9th, 11th, 13th. A 13th chord has 7 notes in it. So obviously that's impossible to play on the guitar and cover all 7 notes. Unless you have a 7-string guitar, I guess. But let's assume you don't. And let's talk about how you can play a 13 chord. So, although a 13 chord is organized the way I said, which is 1, 3, 5, flat 7, 9, 11, 13, you can make certain omissions, and let's omit them all. All the omissions that we can omit, let's do it. So we're going to get rid of the root, we're going to get rid of the 5th, we're going to get rid of the 9th, and we're going to get rid of the 11th. So all we're going to be left with is a flat 7, and yes, I'm going to leave it as my lowest note because I can. Here's a 3rd, and here's my 13th. So I've reduced a 7-note chord into a 3-note chord by eliminating the 1st, the 5th, the 9th, and the 11th. Cool? I mean, where I am, it's pretty easy to just plop my pinky down and get a 9th there, and it's also pretty easy to plop my thumb down here and get a root. But just so you know, a 13th chord can be reduced to 3 notes, which is the most important note being the third, because that determines whether a chord is major or minor, like we talked about in the first tutorial. It's also critical to have a 7th, so you can tell it's a dominant type of chord. And then obviously the name of the chord, the extension of the chord, the 13th is important to have in a 13 chord. Make sense? So there you go. There's a 13 chord, and it resolves nicely to that. Okay, cool. So hopefully that gives you a sense of how these bigger chords work. In the next tutorial, I'm going to take you through an actual chart and show you how I might play through the chords. So yeah, until next time, have fun with this, and we'll see you when we see you.